Hi guys, welcome back to another Creative Design Team collab video. This week we are talking about sketches and we are going to walk you through some of our processes. I'm Julie, welcome to the Scrap Zone. For my project, I'll be using the Make It From Your Heart Volume 5. Now these are awesome jump points for any layouts. You can actually put two in a little 3-ring binder here as I'm showing you. I'm going to be using volume number 5, and the first thing I did was I kind of went through all of those beautiful patterns and I picked the ones that were kind of speaking to me at the time. So I would recommend only sticking to about 3 because otherwise it's just going to be a little overwhelming. So I looked at these because I thought that they looked really good. So the next thing I did is I looked at all of the photo placements. How many photos do I need for each of the layouts that I had picked? And I kind of had an idea of what pictures I wanted to scrapbook. So I ended up picking this pattern right here, pattern number 15. The next thing I did is I printed all of my photos, and I did something a little bit different. I actually matched the colors in my photos with the cardstock, which led me to my next dilemma. Which paper pack was I going to use? I pulled out this old paper pack here, Safari, and this brand new one here called Wonder. Now I'm going to mix and match these two pattern papers, and I'm going to pull in some colors from my photos using cardstock. Now you can see here that I've used Lagoon and Green Apple. They match perfectly with the colors of my pictures. So I was pretty happy with that. So here are the 2 base pages that I'm going to use, and this pattern is perfect for the types of photos that I want to scrapbook today. I'm going to bring in a little bit of pattern paper with the espresso color because it's a muddy layout, and I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. And then, of course, my accent colors were the colors that I selected from my photos. So I've gone ahead here and I've pre-cut everything. So all of these photo mats are 1/4 of an inch larger than the picture. And then I've gone ahead and I've cut these pieces here. And as you can tell, there's not a lot of pieces. And I did my very own title in Cricut Design Space. Now, if you want to see how I've done that, stick around until the end and I will give you a quick tutorial on how that came about. So the next step is putting this layout together, and I know that I want to add some splatters on my titles and a little bit on the top left and on the bottom right. So I just kind of did a dry assembly here just to see how all of the photos were going to work on my layout, and I decided I needed, of course, a little bit of embellishments. So I pulled out these wood shapes. Here, I like that the chevrons are really pointing to my journaling. I added some at the top and a little bit here at the bottom, so you've got that visual triangle, but this layout draws you into the center of the page automatically. Now, these journaling strips were done on my computer, and if you flip your page on the landscape side, you can actually print almost 10.5 inches strips. So that was perfect for this layout. So let's pick up these titles and let's get them a little muddy. So I'm going to pull out my all-purpose mat. And you know, sometimes people ask me, what is the best purchase you've ever done? I think this all-purpose mat definitely is one of them. I'm going to use my Espresso Ink and just my regular water brush, and I'm going to pick up the color inside of the lid. Now this is the fine tip, and the reason why I use a fine tip is because I can control the size of the splatter. The smaller the tip, the smaller the splatter. So I'm going to go ahead here, and you know what? I'm going to test it. I'm going to test it on just a regular piece of white paper. I'm kind of doing this little tap tap, and not much is happening. So I pulled out my re-inker, put it in the lid. It's the same color, so it's not going to contaminate anything. And now I can really see the splatters. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to splatter this Be Strong, which is a Cricut Design Space image from Close to My Heart, and the It's a Real Mud Bath. I'll show you again at the end of the video how to create that in Design Space. So I'm quite happy with this. Now, if I bring this up close, you can see that I've got a little bit of splatters, and they're not too much, like they're not taking front stage from my title, and it just gives it that nice feel for the pictures that I have and the layout that I'm trying to complete with you today. So we're going to clean up our little mess, and then we're going to bring in our pages. Now, sometimes I forget that I want to do splatters, and then I have to kind of mask everything, but I'm glad that I thought about it ahead of time, and I can just move all of those pieces, and then I'm just going to go ahead and tap some of those splatters directly on my page at the bottom. And I really like, it's a small detail, but it really works well with these photos. So we're going to do the same thing on the left hand side. I'm going to move everything off of my base page, even those pictures. They can be stubborn sometimes, but hey, let's move them aside, and let's do that same little tap here in the top corner. And you can also kind of rotate your page if you want to change the direction a tiny little bit. This was actually working out fine for me, but I did tilt it here and I added quite a bit of splatters. And if you're not sure, just do the splatters where you know they're going to be covered by another piece of paper. But in this case here, I think that they turned out quite nicely. So see, I've got my strip and I've got my title. I'm really liking the way this is turning out. I was chatting with a few of the creative design team ladies, and I was asking them, what is your creative process? How do you start? Do you start with the photos? Do you start with the paper? And you know what? We each start a little differently, so I think that you're gonna really enjoy this week's series. I don't always start with the photos, and I don't always start with the pattern paper. Sometimes the pattern paper that you have available to you is just not really matching the photos that you have. So in my case, I mixed 2 paper packs, and then I brought in those beautiful colors. We have so many colors to pick from, so I made sure to pick colors that were in my photos, and I think that it looks really good. Let's talk about putting this layout together. Now, I did bring in my Versamat because it makes it a lot easier to measure those little triangles in the center. And then when I was trying to put them together, I was wondering, well, how am I going to know if it's exactly at the same spot? Well, I moved my left page onto the right page, and then they were kind of closer together, and it made it so much easier just to eyeball it this way. Now you can pull out a T-ruler or you can measure them out, but I just found that by moving your pages together, it was a lot easier just to kind of marry them up. And you can see here I'm doing that with the lagoon piece, and I'm just going to match it up to my other page, and I'm just going to pop that down. And it was as simple as that. And if I look at the layout this way, it looks really good with that in the center. But I'm actually going to use it the way that it was designed in pattern 15, but don't be afraid to move things around. Now the next thing you want to have lined up are your photos. Now again, in the Make It From Your Heart book, they will give you like an approximate size as to where your photos are going to land on your page, but it all depends on the size of your titles, your embellishments. So in this case here, I know that I want to have enough room for my title on the right hand side, so I'm just going to move them up at the 2-inch mark. So I'm going to start with the largest photo here, and I'm going to plop it down, and then I'm going to leave equal distance between all of those photos. So I start here with the 6x4, and then this is a 3x3, and you'll see that I'm leaving the same amount of space between the photo and the edge, and I'm just going to pop that right onto the page. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to make sure that everything is nice and lined up from the left side to the right side, and we're going to finish this layout pretty quickly. So now that I've got all of my photos lined up, the next thing I'm going to want to do is add all of my titles. And you'll see me in a minute here. I'm going to pull some 3D foam tape because automatically, if you want to elevate any layout, just add dimensional foam to your titles or your embellishments and it looks really, really good. So let's talk about these photos for 1 sec, because this is Mud Hero. I don't know if you've heard about this. This is the largest all-Canadian obstacle event series, and I did the 6K 18 obstacle track. Now, you go through all of these obstacles, you get really muddy, really, really fast, but it was something that I wanted to do, and I think I held my own. I was following these girls, which they are all 18 years my junior, and I think, you know what, I held my own and the team made it through to the end. So it is a very muddy experience, but if you have the chance to do it, I highly recommend it. It was quite the high. So anyways, let's get back to putting this layout together, and I'm just adding here my little journaling strip. Now what I did is I lined up the top one with the top of the chevron and the bottom one with the bottom of the chevron, because this way I know exactly where to put the center one. I know that I'm going to leave myself enough space to add that last journaling strip. So this pretty much completes the assembly of this layout, and I invite you to take a look at those how-to books, those Make It From Their Heart, because they are great to jumpstart your creativity and to focus on your pictures and on your stories. I'm going to give you here a quick little close-up of my titles, my splatters, and if you've stuck around this long, you probably want to know how I created these pretty awesome titles in Design Space. So let's pop into Design Space quickly here. So you're going to start with text. You're going to type out your title. So I know that I want to separate that into 2 equal spacing. So I've typed that on 2 lines. And then I am going to select a font. In this case, I used ENDGAME, and I did find that on the font. So I'm just going to switch out my 2 titles here to match that font. And then I am going to kind of squish this together, only because I know I want to do that offset function in Design Space, and if they're too spread out, it's not going to work really nicely. I did here click on ungroup that phrase, and then I'm just kind of sneaking everything together. So I've grabbed all of that word, and now I think that it's got good spacing. So for the mud bath, I can just kind of squish it together, and I'm just going to make sure that this is one group. This one here is already grouped together, and I'm going to click on this really awesome new feature in Design Space, and it's called Offset. So when you click Offset, you'll hit that green button and you see that it brings it in black. If you find that that's too big for you, you can actually change the sizing right up here. You can make it larger, you could make it smaller, you could make the corners rounded or square. Here I made it smaller, but it left a gap here between the H and the T, and I didn't like that. So I'm going to go back to the original size, which is a little bit bigger, but I knew that I wanted to add splatters, so that was okay with me. So I'm going to hit apply. And I'm going to do here I'm just going to change it in yellow and in brown just for demo purpose so that you can see what I'm talking about. This next one here, when I hit the offset button again, it goes back to that last setting that I just did, which is kind of nice. And you'll see that the apply button is kind of grayed out. Sometimes it takes a little while to kind of generate, but just be patient and then just wait until that green box is solid, and then you have these 2 great titles. Now I'm going to group them together only because I want to be able to move them and size them. Now another thing that I do is I bring in just a square piece. I resize it to 12 by 12, so it's the size of my 12 by 12 layout. And then I move my titles onto that 12 by 12 layout just to kind of give myself an idea of how big I want my title. Now to make it even more precise, I bring in a second square and then I change the aspect ratio at the top to a 4 by 6, which represents a photo mat. Then I know exactly how large I can size my title. So see here, it kind of stretched out. It's a reel. And then when I look at the top, it's like, okay, 1.5. All right, so I'm going to go 1.5 for the second one here so that they're both the same size. I'm going to add another photo mat here just to even make it more visual for you. So this is a 4 by 3. And then it gives you a really good idea on how to size your titles on your pages. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and don't forget to come back all week long. Tomorrow, Carrie is going to have an awesome project to share with you. Again, we're going to be here all week long. Thank you so much, and have yourself a fantastic day.